How's it going, everyone? I'm Dylan, this is All You Can Board, and today is a brand new installment of new games I am excited for. There are always new games coming out, more than I can even keep track of. We're usually, having a short list of like 10 or 12 games and having to shave this down because we don't want to feature that many each episode. So I have narrowed it down to 7. There are some really exciting ones here, some that we know a bunch about and some that we know very little about but are on my radar for one reason or another. So before I jump in, I'm just going to mention there is a chance that this mug is going to spill all over the table. If you haven't seen our latest Own It, Play It, Skip It, there is a disaster of a mug spill in there, and it's because this mug has a very round bottom, so even just the slightest knock knocks it over. And I keep putting myself through it because I love these mugs so much, and I can't, find it in myself to just give up on them. So this is a full glass of hot tea. And I have my laptop on the table now, and as well as the audio recording equipment. So if this thing spills, you're gonna see fear in my eyes, just giving you a heads up as my laptop makes a bunch of noise there. All right, let's jump right into this. So the first game we're gonna look at is Space Station Phoenix. So this is a game from Rio Grande Games, and the reason this is on the list, and you might be kind of surprised that this is on the list, because if you've been in our Discord or even heard me talk on certain videos, I'm not the biggest fan of space themes in games. And it's not that I actively dislike them. One of my favorite video games is Mass Effect. I absolutely adore it. It's just that it has to be done in a very I was gonna say a specific way, but I can't even describe exactly what that specific way is. It's just, they don't always land for me. Something like Star Wars does land for me, but yet, a game like Beyond the Sun, which is just, it's almost like, seems like it's a space theme for the sake of being a space theme, doesn't land with me. Space Station Phoenix, it's the mechanics that are really, really exciting to me. And that is because we've seen engine building games. This is sort of an engine destruction game. Now, it's still going to be about building your engine and things like that, but I guess the big selling feature here is that you are essentially going to have this engine that creates a bunch of resources, and you're deconstructing it over the course of the game, but you're having to do it in a way that still makes your engine efficient as you deconstruct it. And on top of that, it even mentions here that it features deep replayability with millions of possible starting positions and station part combinations. So the way that your station, your own personal station, and your opponent's personal stations are going to start the game that you're going to then have to deconstruct is going to be different pretty much every time. If you have millions of combinations, and let's be honest, how many times are we actually playing like a certain board game each year when there's so many different games to play? Even if you play this every single week, you're still only playing that 52 times a year. With millions of combinations, you're probably never ever going to see every single one of them. So that, to me, someone who really, really enjoys the fact that you can have variable setup in games, or variable cards or decks or whatever, that's something I really appreciate in board games. That really spoke to me as soon as I read that. It's one of the reasons I love Res Arcana so much, and I grew to love it more over time, is that the starting position you find yourself in with that small 8-card deck, I think it is different every single game. Or even if it's not 100% different, like some of the cards are the same, the combinations are different, you have to find a strategy there. I feel like this is a pretty neat aspect of Space Station Phoenix, to be able to have this variable setup every single time, and then also on top of that, the way you're interacting with it is unique in that you're deconstructing it. So if you've heard me talk about, I think I just talked about in a video really recently, how I approach board games that I haven't played. I usually don't read rule books before I pick them up. I'll do a scan through the mechanics. I'll do a scan through the rule books sometimes to understand mechanics a little bit better, but generally if I think something is going to land with me, I just leave it at that. I purchase the game or I play it somewhere, and then I find out whether it truly does. I like the moment of discovering that board game when you open the box, when you read the rule book. I don't want to do too much investigative work ahead of time. So that's sort of why I've left it with Space Station Phoenix. There are a bunch of photos I've been putting up on the screen, and there is a lot of looks at the game, and the table presence looks really, really great. Again, the theme in this I don't think is going to bother me too much, because again, it's not so much that space theme bothers me, it's just it's not something I'm always attracted to. The game has to do something else that dramatically gets my attention for me to latch onto it, whereas something with a fantasy theme, generally I'm just interested in at least checking out right away, because that's just something I'm drawn to, the exploration, the fantasy of it. So the Space Station Phoenix looks really, really cool. There's been a lot of praise for it in terms of, and I know this is coming from Rio Grande Games, and obviously publishers aren't going to say our game isn't landing with people. They're only going to say the positives, but they have said that everyone who's played it has immediately wanted to know like when they can pick it up and buy it. So you can put whatever faith you want in that, but I'm hoping that is true, and I'm hoping that is a testament to what we have here on our hands here. So I think this is coming out in the next few months. what that means for the wide release, I'm not sure. Sometimes a board game comes out, it'll say like, it comes out in April, and only a couple people get in their hands in April. So I'm hoping that we get it sooner rather than later, because I'm really, really excited to dive into this. It plays in about 30 minutes per player. So, not a drastically huge experience, but meaty enough to not just be like this really small experience that is, over before you know it. So I'm really excited to dive into this. That is Space Station Phoenix. All right, the next game we're gonna take a look at is a game from one of my favorite designers, one of Carlos' favorite designers, and that is Reiner Knizia. If a Reiner Knizia game gets announced or talked about, it's likely going to be on our radar in some fashion. Even if it's not to buy, it's at least to try out and play or investigate a little bit more. This one is called the San Francisco. It's got some beautiful art on the cover, and that's pretty much all we've seen of it, is the cover and of course the Knizia being attached. So this game is again, someone we know a whole ton about, but based on the small nuggets of information I have and the fact that Knizia is attached, I'm confident enough that I will at least be interested in it, in playing it, that it's now on my radar and making this list. So it has some different mechanics involved. It's a 2 to 4 player game, plays in about 45 to 60 minutes apparently. It's got tile placement, open drafting, end game bonuses, things like that. I'm a huge fan of tile placement games. I find that usually their mechanics are simple enough but deep enough when that mechanic is used properly to really just be a game I want to come back to, and they're not usually too hard for people to understand and learn, especially one of this length. In San Francisco, you're essentially a city planner, and I think it's the first half of the 20th century is what it's listed as. You're just helping to plan or give potential plans for the city of San Francisco. All your opponents are rival city planners, and you're essentially designing districts of 5 different types. And again, without seeing the tiles, without seeing the actual visuals, it's hard for me to know, or the rulebook, it's hard for me to understand everything about how this plays. But the little nuggets that I've read and what I know about it is what's sort of attracting me to it. So you're going to be designing these 5 different districts, racing against other planners while you do so. In the tiles you place, you're going to also be connecting cable cars, like the cable car connections that obviously San Francisco is famous for. It says you're going to be building new skyscrapers as well. One of the things that really jumped out to me is it says you have to choose the right moment to take on new projects in these districts. The reason that one sentence attracts me is that one of Knizia's staples of his design is that usually there's this simple mechanic that the timing of when you do things is where it all of a sudden becomes this grueling, amazing experience. And I'll use Lost Cities as an example. Lost Cities is a game where all you're doing is playing a card and drawing a card to 5 different sections that are having to go up in ascending order. So really, the game itself is so simple. The small little design thing that makes Lost City interesting is something so simple, and that's that you have to play a card or discard a card before you draw a new one. And you're all drawing from the same shared deck, which means that sometimes you're gonna have a hand of cards where you're like, I don't wanna get rid of any of this. And I could play this green 6, but really I only have a single handshake on the board right now. Again, this makes more sense if you know the rules. That if I play a 6, I can no longer play the 2, 3, 4, or 5. And sometimes you'll play that 6 and draw into a 5, and you're like, oh my god, now this card's useless to me, right? And it's those moments that, even though it's somewhat luck-based with the deck, it's also hand management and knowing how much you want to push your luck and when do you want to take these risks, which ones are the more calculated risks, things like that. It's such a small thing that you have to play before you draw that it just adds so much tension and excitement to the game. And the fact that something, even just this one sentence saying, earn more prestige by, wrong sentence, choosing the right moment to take on new projects, makes me think we're going to see something somewhat similar here, where depending when you take on these projects, there's going to be that, Knizia touch on it, being like, oh, I shouldn't take this on, or oh, I should have, why didn't I? Things like that. Those are the moments I love in board games. That's one of the reasons I'm really excited about this, and of course because Reiner Knizia is attached. So I cannot wait to learn more. I hope it's not too far off in the distance. That is San Francisco by Reiner Knizia. Did you think we were done with Reiner Knizia? Because if you did, you were completely wrong, because I have 2 Reiner Knizia games, and the next one is Longboard. So this is a very different game where you're essentially designing your own surfboard. So Carlos sent this to me, and I had seen it before, but he sent it the link, and his comment was something up to do with the fact that like Reiner Knizia a game about designing surfboards, this man has done everything. Like, it's true, he tackles pretty much like even though he's designed so many games, it's like no topic, no theme is off limits. Like, it's more just about the mechanics, and he wraps different themes in it. I find that very interesting. So this one we know a little bit more about, and we actually have some more images of the back of the box, so we can actually see a little bit more of how it plays. This is a 20 to 30 minute playing game, so it's a much shorter game, probably half the length of San Francisco. It is 2 to 4 players as well. It's got open drafting and set collection as its two main mechanics, and basically what you're doing is you're building different surfboards on the table. You're gonna have ones of various colors that are you're playing cards to that you're gonna keep extending, but there's rules on how you can extend those surfboards. So it says that in Longboard, players will draft and trade surfboard pieces as they attempt to build the tallest and most attractive surfboards. More specifically, on a turn, you take 2 actions with 3 types of actions being possible. So there's 3 actions, and you can only choose 2 of them on your turn. One of those is to add a card from the deck to your personal supply that's basically right in front of you. That is where I guess you're creating your longboards, your surfboards. The other one is to take a card from your supply to start or lengthen a board. So you're gonna have your supply as well as all your boards, and you can take cards from that supply to keep extending surfboards or to start brand new ones. In some ways, this is sounds a little bit similar to me to Canopy, which we recently talked about and did a bunch of content on, where that's a small aspect of Canopy, but you're essentially getting Canopy cards that you can start new trees, or you can extend current trees to make them longer. This has that same kind of mechanic, but unlike Canopy, that all trees can go into the same ones. Longboards are going to be in a variety of different colors, including some wilds, which means you can only put certain colors with certain colors, obviously like blue with blue, and wilds can go anywhere. So you're going to have a little bit, that's going to be the focus of this game, where it was a minor aspect of Canopy. So you're going to be taking cards from your supply to add them to there. Another one, this is the most interesting thing about the game. This is the reason I'm actually really, really intrigued by it, is that the third action that you can possibly do is place 1 or more cards in your supply into an opponent's supply, then take a single card from their supply of value less than the sum of what you gave them, and use this card to start or lengthen a board. So the surfboards have values on them, and one of the rules is when you're placing cards, from what I understand, is that if I'm putting another card onto a surfboard, it has to be higher than the current value that is present in the surfboard. So if the highest one currently on the surfboard is a 3, I couldn't place a value 2. I think I'm getting this right. Maybe I have it reversed and you're going lower numbers as you go up, but I think that's what I remember reading. But the interesting thing here is that I can take 2 cards, one or more cards, I should say, so it could be more than 2, from my supply and add that sum together, put them into an opponent's supply, so I'm giving them cards that they can use, but then I'm able to take a single card from their supply that they may want to use that's value less and add it to one of my boards immediately. That player interaction is gonna make this game, in my opinion, because honestly, I'm not always the biggest fan of player interaction when it has to do with your personal board. And what I mean by that is, we just talked about recently a game like Empires of the North or Imperial Settlers, where we each have our own board going on, and suddenly someone does something and they say, oh, by the way, destroy that, because I just played this, you have to destroy that. And it just seems a little bit arbitrary and a little bit like I'm working on my own thing, but suddenly someone comes in and just destroys, and I just have to deal with the consequences. Because this is a later game, and because you're not outright destroying, yes, you're stealing a card, but you're giving them 2, 3, 4 cards in exchange for it. So they're still getting something that now they can use those cards to sort of come up with an alternate strategy. It's more the hilarity of like that much interaction happening, the fact that I can't just feel safe with a card in my supply. I could take an amazing card and say, oh, I'm gonna wanna play this, it's in my supply. But now I have to consider that before I get a chance to play it, maybe if I'm not gonna take that action this turn, someone could come in and take that card, and are they willing to spend more cards than they need to take that card from me and give me potentially other cards I can use. That to me is what is going to make this game so interesting. That sounds so good. I'm more excited about this one than San Francisco, obviously because we know more about this one, but everything I've seen about this in the description and from the images just seems like a game that I'm going to love getting to the table, and it plays so quick that you're going to definitely be able to get in multiple sessions. So that is Longboard, the second and final game in today's video by Knizia. So the next one is going to be a quick one. That's because we honestly know very, very little, and by very, very little, I mean we just know that it exists. So Carlo tipped me off to this, and the reason I didn't even know what this is it's not on Board Game Geek, and it was in an update that was sent, I think, in the backer kit to people who backed Overboss. So Overboss, which I have right here, is one of my favorite games. And when I say one of my favorite games, you know, I just mean like it's in my top 50. So, and I consider all the games in my top 50 to be some of my favorite games. So I really, really like Overboss. And on the backer kit for Overboss, Brotherwise Games announced that they are actually working on a follow-up, and this follow-up has an interesting twist on it. It's essentially the tentative name they're going with is Overboss Duel. So it is going to be an expansion to the original game, but it's also going to be a standalone two-player dueling version of Overboss. So what I take that to mean is that if you have Overboss, you're gonna be able to expand your game with this new content and have a bunch more that you can now either potentially use in the 4-player game, 3-player game, but also now have this 2-player game experience. It's gonna expand on everything. Or you can play it separately as a 2-player duel game, or you don't even have to own the original Overboss. You could just buy this and have a 2-player dual version of Overboss. That's really exciting to me. I love good 2-player games because obviously it's some of the ones I get to the table the most these days. Obviously because of the pandemic, that was also partially the case. But when they're done well, something like, Seven Wonders Duel, they're just amazing. So I have high hopes that because this is going to expand a game I have, but also function as a 2-player experience, that it's going to be something I'm really going to resonate with. And of course, the theme, the artwork, and the gameplay of Overboss was just something I really loved. So having more of that with Overboss Duel is just really exciting. I honestly don't know anything more about this. I don't even know if this is potentially at all even realistic for 2022, or we're looking at 2023. I don't know if this is coming to Kickstarter. No idea. I just know it exists. So it's a really short little feature here, but I am really, really excited about this because of how much I liked Overboss and how much I like 2-player games. Next up, we have one that, I'm going to take a quick sip of this so that my mouth isn't too dry. Don't want to spill that. The next one is one that it has been announced for a little bit now. It's not too brand new of an announcement, but I only recently clued into it. And this is a new version of Cryptid, which is a game that I never got around to playing, but it's been on my list for so long. Part of the reason I didn't play it was with the pandemic. I assumed Cryptid was going to be a better experience with more players, and it was just hard to get that to the table at that point. But this is a new version that's only for 2 players, and it's called Cryptid Urban Legends. So to me, that's really exciting because I like these, hidden movement games, games that like originate from like Scotland Yard, which maybe isn't the first one, I don't know for sure. But it's something that I always just think is a really fun mechanic and a funny mechanic to play with people around the table. It's one of the reasons I'm really looking forward to playing, oh my God, Mind Management. I was gonna forget the name. I knew it was management. I was like, what is the first word in there? So one of the reasons I'm really looking forward to playing that game. So Cryptid Urban Legends is a 2-player version of it that isn't quite a hidden movement game. It's got it in its mechanic list, but it's nowhere near the same type of hidden movement as the original Cryptid because it is a 2-player game. But it is a very interesting mechanic. You're essentially going to have these tiles that represent districts or areas of the city that are going in a checkerboard pattern on the table, and I'll obviously post some images. You'll see some of this on the screen, but going in a checkerboard pattern, you're gonna have these little tokens, these little square tokens, and it's all about manipulating these square tokens, which represent the one side, which is the Cryptid, and the Scientist, which is the other player. The Cryptid is going to basically have some of these tiles that represent where it could be on the map, and the way the person who is the Cryptid wins is by getting, when you have at least 7 tiles in the city, so in the first 2 rounds of the game, I believe you can't actually win the game, like you can't check for victory. Or you can check for victory, you just won't win. You have to basically have at least 7 tiles on the board and get one of your cubes on the far left and one of your cubes on the far right, and this represents them having not enough information and the Cryptid getting away because they're just spreading themselves out to too many possible locations. So that's the goal of the Cryptid, whereas the Scientist is trying to narrow things down, and the Scientist can win on the first turn of the game. They're trying to eliminate some of the cubes to have less cubes on the board. I think you have to get it down to either 0 or 1 or something like that for the Scientist to win. So everything you're doing is essentially manipulating the cubes that they can only move in certain patterns. You might be able to move diagonally. They don't actually go on top of the tiles. They go in between the tiles, which is really neat. So you have the tiles that represent, the paths you're having to work your way between with these cubes to sort of evade the Scientist. You can move diagonally with one of the actions. One of them you move sideways and then diagonally. Another one, you're splitting the current location, the cubes, into 2 different spots. So you're manipulating the location. One row is considered active, one row is considered inactive, and that matters with the placement of the cubes as well. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm obviously not going to explain it all here. The rulebook is readily available, so you can actually go look it up and see if this is a game that interests you. For me, this is just an opportunity to get a game like Cryptid to the table easier because it's only for 2 players, that has elements of that hidden movement, even if it's not going to be a full, hidden movement experience in the same vein as the original Cryptid. So I'm intrigued enough to check it out. From what I've read, it seems like it's something I'm going to at least enjoy, even if it doesn't scratch the exact same itch as Cryptid. It seems like it'll be an enjoyable experience for 2 players. It plays in like 20 to 40 minutes, so that's a really quick experience as well. That is Cryptid Urban Legends. All right, next up we have another game that isn't yet listed on Board Game Geek, but it has actually had its box art posted on Board Game Geek's forums by, I believe it was the designer or someone involved with the company or Arcane Wonders or something. And this is an expansion to Air, Land, and Sea, and it's called Air, Land, and Sea Spies, Lies, and Supplies. So if you're a fan of rhymes, this game is for you. So Air, Land, and Sea is a 2-player card dueling game that Carlo and I have played. Carlo owns it. I really, really like it. I honestly have not played enough of. If you've been a fan of this channel for a while or seen other videos of ours, you know that I'm just a fan of 2-player card battling games, card dueling games. Carlo and I grew up with them, grew up with Magic the Gathering. So games that involve those mechanics are just ones that really resonate with me, and I just love experiencing. That's one of the reasons why Radlands was my top game of 2021. So Air, Land, and Sea was a really interesting experience because you had these 3 lanes, air, land, and sea, and a very limited pool of cards to pull from each game. That's basically different every single game. So out of the entire deck of cards, everyone's going to end up, I can't remember how many you have in your hand, if it's 3 or if it's 6. It might be 6. Either way, it's been a while since I played it, but you're essentially being able to play these cards into one of these lanes, air, land, and sea. Some of them will have restrictions of where they can be played. Other ones are going to be able to manipulate the board. You can play some of them face down and then flip them up later to activate abilities, and they all have abilities and as well as having a value in them. And the value in them, basically at the end of the game, you have to win 2 of the 3 lanes, and you're going to add the value of the cards on your side, and if they surpass your opponents, you're going to win that lane. But it's this push and pull and knowing when to hold back certain cards to see what your opponent does to then sort of counter and do something to their board, and sometimes you're going to have a hand that's going to be really hard to win against your opponent, but you play multiple games. I think you have to win a certain number of tokens or victory points essentially, and to actually win the entire thing. So if you get a really unlucky experience, it's not like you're just out of it or anything like that. Sort of in the same way that Lost Cities, I'm using that as an example again, has 3 games that you play, and you get the score the total points of all 3 games to sort of mitigate some of that luck. The reason I'm excited about this, even though I don't own the game, is that even in the limited time I played Air, Land, and Sea, for me, it was someone who loves variety in cards and things like that. I thought over time, if I keep playing this, yes, I'll get better with like knowing what cards are in the total deck and trying to discern what my opponent has in their hand, or know the strategies a little bit better and how to counteract things. But for me personally, I could find over time that it would just wear a little bit thin with me thinking, I've seen these cards before, I know this counter, I know if I draw this card, I'm gonna probably do this, or I just have to hope my opponent doesn't have this. That over time would sort of wear a little bit thin for me personally. So the fact that they're expanding on the game is really exciting to me, because I think just adding more cards, more mechanics, and new ways to experience the game is something that is going to make this so attractive to me and make me want to own a copy of the original now rather than just play it at Carlos, because now I'll have even more cards and reasons to play it. So I don't know much more about it. It is an expansion. I don't know whether it's considered also a standalone expansion that can play with this set of cards on its own, whether you need to add it to the original. I don't know how many cards are coming in it. I don't know if it's just cards or there's any other mechanics being added in, but just its existence alone has me really excited. So if you haven't checked out Air, Land, and Sea, and this sounds, if you're a fan of 2-player card battling games and some of what I've described sound interesting, honestly, I'd recommend checking it out. It's a really, really good game. The theme honestly doesn't resonate with me at all. I'm not a fan of the war theme, but the gameplay is so solid that I can ignore that and just enjoy it for what it is. And the last game we're going to look at is a really, really beautiful looking game in terms of table presence and the artwork. This is from Pretzel Games, and it is called Yak. So this is definitely, I'll be the first to admit, it seems like a much more simpler experience. It might even be classified as a family game. I don't really know. It depends. I'll have to play it to actually know what the strategic depth of it is here. But it's got unbelievable table presence. You're seeing from the photos now with the actual yaks and the carts that they're pulling behind them, as well as all the resources and everything like that on the board. It all looks really beautiful. And essentially what's happening is you're going to have these yaks pulling their carts, moving in a circular pattern around the board. Every player is always going to have one of these yaks in front of them. You're essentially going to be, on your turn, buying things from the yak's cart to build up this tower of blocks. I'm not sure in the theme of the game what it represents, but you're building up this tower of blocks in front of you, and you're buying these blocks with resources that you're also collecting from the game board, from the yaks carts, but each of the yaks is going to have different requirements. So like for instance, you could have a bunch of meat resources that, and I don't know whether this is present in the game, I think they just used it as an example, but say I had a bunch of meat resources, the yak that comes up in front of me could be a yak that's a vegetarian and won't actually take any meat resources, which means I now can't buy anything from the yak. So I think part of what the strategy is going to come from is planning for the yak that you have in front of you and what you want to purchase, but also looking at what the next one is, what its restrictions are, and knowing whether or not you're going to be properly prepared for the next round in terms of, you know, efficiency and making sure you're buying all the blocks you need and outpacing your opponents in that way. So to me, it seems like there's enough here to potentially be really accessible to any age range, but also have that strategic depth that if you want to take it a step further and really get into the nitty gritty of it and try to maximize your score with, you know, other adult players, other people that with your mindset, you'll be able to do that and couple all that with the amazing table presence. And it's just a game I think I'll have an absolute joy bringing out. You know, it's one of the same reasons that Azul is just such a joy to play, because it's not all about how great the gameplay is. It's also just a beautiful game to have on the table, and you just feel so satisfied as you're playing that game. Yak just seems like it's going to have that satisfaction in terms of its table presence, and it has just this really fun mechanic of having to manage the yaks that are moving around the board and when you're going to sort of buy certain things from them and how you collect the resources to be able to do those things. So honestly, there's not a whole lot more to say. I don't know when exactly this is coming out. I'm sure it's listed somewhere. I can't imagine it's very far off. It is listed as a 2022 game. I'm hoping it's in the next few months, maybe by the summer. We really hope we can get our hands on a copy as soon as possible. That is Yak from Pretzel Games. Those are the 7 games in today's video. Let me know, as always, in the comments which of these 7 games you are most excited about, and especially let me know if any of these games you didn't know about and you discovered because of our video. I always love to hear when someone says, I had no idea this was coming out and you include me and now it's on my list. I guess I just love making you guys spend your money on new board games. Not actually, but it's one of those things that I just get extra satisfaction of knowing that, you know, now someone else is excited about something because I clued them into it. It's you sharing that excitement with me. Even if you don't end up buying the game, if you just play it somewhere, or maybe one day if you're from Winnipeg, or if you meet us at a convention, we'll be the one that gets to sit down and play this game with you or something like that. So let me know which of these games you are most interested in, and more so, let me know if there are any games I did not include on this list that you were expecting to see, or that you think I should be aware of, or that should be on my radar, that you think I would like. Like I said, there is normally a short list and we cut this down, so there were some games that didn't make this list that you maybe will be the ones you name, but there also might be ones I don't know about that then we can include next month, or in the future, or at least just put in our list. So let me know in the comments. If you haven't joined our Discord and you want to have more conversations about new games with us, or non-game stuff, or just talk with the community, or play other games online on Board Game Arena and Tabletop Simulator, we have an active Discord. You can find the link in the description below. It's free to join. You can chat with us there. You can just read comments and not chat, whatever you want to do. We would just love to have you if it's something that you want to be involved with. And also, if you want to support us in any way, there's some options in the description below, whether that's Patreon or PayPal, or buying merch, or even just subscribe to the channel and telling a friend. We always appreciate all that support. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.